11:30 a.m. Saturday, January the 11th, 1960, and the Stony Point steam train heads for home again across the meadows of Victoria's Mornington. They won't be seeing old Steamy again. That was his last journey. Now he'll be going down to the scrapyards where all the other steam locomotives went. Johnny will have to forget his ambition steam loco driver, because the only puffers left when he grows up will be toy ones, like the donkey engine his father gave him for his birthday. The donkey engine was an expensive gift, but it counted as compensation for the loss of old Steamy. But when Johnny was asleep, Father revealed his guilty secret. He hadn't really bought the engine for Johnny at all. He'd bought it for himself. You see, where steam engines were concerned, John Tuckman Sr. had never really grown up. It all started when he was a boy at school. The local railway line, with all its fascinating engines, inspired John to hand in an art project book on the steam locomotive. To begin with, he drew poor old Richard Trevithick's locomotive, which was of course the world's first. He wasn't quite sure why he put the horse in the picture, but went to work on Trevithick's ideas. Yes, Stephenson's rocket was indeed the world's first successful steam locomotive project when he was able to take up the story in Australia, for in 1859 the Victorian Railways began operations. The map of Australia was included to show how the railways rapidly spread around the continent. John never saw the first locos that worked the Peninsula Run. Nevertheless, he drew one of those fine old engines as they appeared fresh from the works at Ballarat. Although a staunch Victorian, John Tuckman couldn't help admiring the sturdy locomotives of New South Wales. He didn't see these dandy fellows, but their fine C-32 engine he did see. These chunky locos were designed to operate on the New South main lines, which rank as some of the world's toughest. Pounding up heavy grades or cracking a hot pace for some sports car over undulating country, all in a day's work for old man C-32. At the parting of the ways, the race was declared a draw. Yet, in a way, the old loco may have scored a victory. Admiration of these three young travellers from Victoria. The C-35-36s never became famous for their good looks. In fact, railwaymen called them the pigs. John Tuckman objected to this. He would only remember the good things about them, like the impressive records of power and speed they set over difficult routes like the northern. Here the permanent way skirts the Hawkesbury River for miles, and the big 36s were able to lope easily along, getting their breath for the long climb ahead. They needed it. They called it the Cowan Bank, this mountain that rose from the river, defiantly blocking north from south. Spurning the assistance offered by the pusher engines at the foot, the big 36s would tackle the climb single-handed. With the speed at times reduced almost to walking pace, the driver and fireman would work together as a perfect team, extracting the last ounce of power from their great pulsating steed in the long march onwards and upwards. Every hard worker deserves a rest, and that's just what the panting C-36 got at the summit town of Coan after the long climb. That was the sort of loco they needed in a state where the going was really tough. Yet, believe it or not, they could still go one better. The wonderful C-38s were an immediate success, proudly taking important crack expresses. Most of the C-38s were not streamlined. And 5 of them were, just for effect. Over the long, sinuous track that links Sydney with Albury, the big 38s would haul the expresses with such ferocity that John Tuckman complained of the roughness of the ride, and so did many others. But in the morning, he would wake up to see the scenery flashing by and remember the big fellow up front that was still steaming along so beautifully. Drawing engines was hard work, so John Tuckman bought a camera and snapped some of his famous engines, such as the great and the little brother branch line loco, D3. He was just in time with his camera. Yes, even the great X-class heavyweight freight tramp was all but finished as the era of steam moved swiftly towards its end. There's an amazing story behind the Victorian Railways 1928 vintage S-class locos. It's a story which is always linked with the name of the celebrated Chief Railway Commissioner, Sir Harold Clapp. Clapp needed some powerful locomotives for his crack new express, the Spirit of Progress. The S-class locos weren't new, and they didn't quite look the part. Nevertheless, Clapp had them super streamlined, effecting quite a remarkable transformation. Appropriately, they were named after 4 great Australian explorers: Matthew Flinders, C.J. Latrobe, Sir Thomas Mitchell, and Edward Henty. A new skin doesn't make a new loco. Even so, they continued to maintain their 51 miles per hour schedule for 20 years, before finally limping off to the scrapyards to be broken up. With a bit of luck and a lot of hard work, it may happen that one steam route will live on. It's the 2'6" narrow gauge Puffing Billy line that winds through the Dandenong Ranges east of Melbourne. The Victorian Railways abandoned Billy after a landslide blocked the line, and all Melbourne was sad. Then a preservation society was formed, and they planned their mammoth task ahead. But unhappily, even the wildest optimists had to admit that there seemed little hope of success. The Australian Army doesn't usually spend its time rebuilding old railway lines, but seeing the plight of the Puffing Billy Preservation Society and realizing the job could be a good exercise, they came to the party in full force. If these hard-working people succeed in their great venture, then once again the hills will echo to the happy sounds as Puffing Billy rides again. Tuckman was always a wheel arrangement. When Tuckman heard the news that the South Gippsland line, which had been the last stronghold of steam, was going over to diesels, he made quite sure he had one last ride.
All aboard the Corumburra, Leongatha, Yarram line train. All aboard, please.
And so, after paying his respects to the engine, as he always did, he boarded the very last steam-hauled train to South Gippsland just as it was about to depart. As the train moved the suburbs, John Tuckman listened to the comforting sounds he knew so well, as the big loco up front strained to gather speed. Suburbs swung beside the line. Goodbye, big man. Your day is done. But you won't be completely forgotten. Frederick fathers will tell their sons of the happy Roman road when the steam locomotive was king. Those were the days.